The human mind is a fascinating and complex organ. It's capable of incredible feats of intelligence, creativity, and empathy. However, it also has its fair share of quirks and biases. These quirks, known as cognitive biases, can lead us to perceive the world in slightly, or sometimes wildly, inaccurate ways. Cognitive biases are like mental shortcuts. They help our brains process information quickly, but they can also lead to systematic errors in our thinking. These errors can affect our daily lives in ways we might not even realize. Think of them as those funhouse mirrors at the carnival. You know, the ones that make you look taller, shorter, or just plain distorted. Just as these mirrors can warp our physical appearance, cognitive biases can similarly distort our perceptions of ourselves and the world around us. They can influence our decisions, our judgments, and even our interactions with others. These biases aren't a sign of stupidity. They're simply a byproduct of how our brains evolved to cope with a complex world. Our ancestors relied on these mental shortcuts for survival, and they were incredibly useful in many situations. We all experience them to some degree, and understanding them is the first step to mitigating their influence on our decisions and judgments. By recognizing these biases, we can strive to make more rational and informed choices. Now let's delve into one particularly intriguing cognitive bias, the Dunning-Kruger Effect. Fasten your seatbelts, because this is where things get really interesting. The Dunning-Kruger Effect is a cognitive bias that has profound implications for how we perceive our own abilities and the abilities of others. The Dunning-Kruger Effect, in the simplest terms, is the tendency for people with low ability in a particular area to overestimate their skills in that area. In other words, it's the "I'm not sure what I don't know, so I must be good at this" phenomenon. Imagine someone who's just learned the basics of playing the guitar. They might strum a few chords and think, "Hey, I'm pretty good at this. Maybe I should audition for a band." Little do they know, they've barely scratched the surface of what it takes to be a skilled musician. This isn't about being intentionally delusional. It's about a genuine lack of awareness regarding one's own limitations. And the more incompetent someone is in a particular area, the more likely they are to overestimate their abilities. It's a bit like being lost in the woods, but convinced you're on the right path. So how did this curious cognitive bias come to light? Let's rewind the clock to 1999 and meet the researchers who first identified this phenomenon. The Dunning-Kruger Effect is named after social psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger, who conducted a groundbreaking study in 1999. Their research involved a series of experiments designed to assess people's self-perceptions of their abilities in areas like humor, grammar, and logical reasoning. In one experiment, participants were asked to rate their performance on a humor test after actually taking the test. The results were striking. Those who scored in the bottom quartile, meaning they were among the least funny, consistently overestimated their comedic prowess, often rating themselves as above average. This pattern held true across various skills and knowledge domains. The less competent individuals were, the more likely they were to inflate their self-assessments. It was as if their lack of knowledge prevented them from recognizing their own incompetence. Dunning and Kruger's research provided empirical evidence for a phenomenon that many had observed anecdotally, that incompetence often masks itself as confidence. But why does this happen? Let's explore the psychological underpinnings of this intriguing bias. The Dunning-Kruger effect arises from a fascinating interplay of cognitive factors. This psychological phenomenon explains why people with low ability at a task often overestimate their ability. It's not just about being wrong, it's about being wrong with confidence. One key factor is the role of metacognition, or the ability to think about our own thinking. Metacognition allows us to evaluate and regulate our cognitive processes, but it requires a certain level of skill and knowledge to be effective. People with low competence in a particular area often lack the metacognitive skills necessary to accurately assess their own performance. This lack of self-awareness leads them to believe they are more competent than they actually are. Think of it like this. To To recognize that you're making mistakes, you need to have some understanding of what constitutes a mistake in the first place. Without this foundational knowledge, it's easy to misjudge your own abilities. If you lack that foundational knowledge, you're more likely to blunder along blissfully unaware of your shortcomings. This can lead to a cycle where you continue to make the same mistakes without ever realizing it. Another contributing factor is the so-called illusion of explanatory depth. This cognitive bias makes us believe we understand complex systems or concepts more deeply than we actually do. This refers to our tendency to overestimate our understanding of how things work. We might feel confident that we understand a complex concept, but when asked to explain it, we quickly realize the gaps in our knowledge. We might feel confident that we understand a complex concept, but when asked to explain it, we quickly realize the gaps in our knowledge. This can be a humbling experience, but it's also a crucial step in improving our understanding. Finally, our brains have a natural tendency to seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs, a phenomenon known as confirmation bias. This bias can reinforce our inflated self-views by filtering out contradictory information. This means that when we're incompetent in a particular area, we're more likely to notice and remember information that supports our inflated self-view, while conveniently ignoring evidence to the contrary. This selective attention can create a distorted self-perception that is hard to correct. The Dunning-Kruger Effect isn't just a quirky psychological phenomenon, it has real-world implications that play out in various aspects of our lives. This cognitive bias can influence our decisions, interactions, and even our self-perception in ways we might not immediately recognize. Let's consider a few examples. The overconfident job candidate. Picture a job interview where a candidate with limited experience confidently rattles off buzzwords and claims expertise they don't possess. They might believe they are impressing the interviewers with their self-assured demeanor. Their inflated self-assessment might impress some, but it's unlikely to fool those with genuine expertise in the field. Experienced interviewers can often see through the facade, recognizing the lack of depth in the candidate's knowledge. The amateur stock trader. The stock market can be a treacherous terrain, especially for those with limited financial literacy. Novice investors driven by overconfidence may dive into trading without fully understanding the complexities involved. Dunning-Kruger can lead novice investors to make risky bets, overestimating their ability to predict market movements and potentially leading to significant financial losses. This overconfidence can result in devastating financial consequences, not just for the individual, but sometimes for the broader market as well. The self-proclaimed social media guru. In the age of social media, everyone's an expert, or so it seems. Platforms like Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter are filled with individuals who present themselves as authorities on various subjects, from fitness to finance. Dunning-Kruger is alive and well in the online world, where individuals with superficial knowledge often portray themselves as thought leaders and influencers. Their confidence can attract large followings, but their advice can sometimes be misleading or even harmful. These are just a few examples of how the Dunning-Kruger effect can manifest in everyday life. It can affect our professional environments, our financial decisions, and even our online interactions. From our careers to our personal relationships, this cognitive bias can lead to misjudgments, missed opportunities, and even potentially harmful consequences. Recognizing the Dunning-Kruger effect in ourselves and others is the first step towards mitigating its impact and making more informed decisions. The Dunning-Kruger effect doesn't just affect individuals, it can have broader societal implications as well. When people in positions of power or influence overestimate their abilities, the consequences can be far-reaching. Imagine a politician making critical decisions about healthcare or education without a solid understanding of the complexities involved. Or a CEO steering a company towards disaster because they're blind to their own limitations. In such cases, the Dunning-Kruger effect can have a ripple effect, impacting the lives of many. Moreover, this cognitive bias can hinder progress and innovation. When people are overly confident in their existing knowledge, they're less likely to seek out new information or challenge their assumptions. This can stifle creativity and prevent us from finding better solutions to the challenges we face. The Dunning-Kruger Effect is a stark reminder that competence and confidence don't always go hand in hand. In fact, sometimes the more we know, the more we realize how much we don't know. This realization can be humbling, but it's also the first step towards true expertise.